about fun stuff today, like music and playing guitar, playing drums. If you want to play guitar and you don't yet have a guitar, check it out. My sponsor, 5 Star Guitars, is the best place to be able to find great guitars, get lessons, get repairs done. I've mentioned this on the show before. If you are looking for an amazing guitar and you've been shopping online at one of those big box stores, Oregon has no sales tax. They're based right here in Beaverton, Oregon. So you can save up all that money, find a great guitar, and then buy local, and support our sponsors, which we very much appreciate. So go to www.5starguitars.com and share the wealth by buying yourself a great guitar. And then hopefully we'll find a cure for this pandemic and you'll be out there rocking and you'll make great changes in the world like my next guest. I met this guy when he was 12 years old. Came to me as a referral for a drum lesson back when I was teaching some drum lessons and I thought I knew what I was talking about. He came to me with great chops way beyond my own. He was also an incredible basketball player. He played violin. I don't think there's anything he couldn't do. And aside from all those accomplishments, I found out that he's a remarkable human being. I love this man and his spirit. I'm really excited to catch up with him. He is in the sleepy town of Santa Barbara, California. And we're going to catch up and share a little positivity with you. So with no further ado, please welcome my buddy, Ryan Anderson. How are you, pal?
I'm doing all right, Kev. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic, man. Now I am. I told you, I miss your face. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. We had really cool times. I've watched you grow up. And, in the setup for the show, I talked a little bit about your evolution as a drummer. When you first came to me and you were interested in playing drums, you had all these aspirations to be a studio drummer, I think at that point. And you went from Rex Putnam High School on to this remarkable career, going to Berkeley School of Music when you were 15. I remember you went to the summer program there. So let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about your beginnings. I don't mean to make this sound like an interview, you're not being interrogated, but it's a really cool story. And I think any aspiring musician should hear both good and bad processes for Ryan's journey. So tell me about, do you remember that time at all when you first came to me and you were referred as a drum student?
Oh yeah, man. That was back in the day. Before that, it was Chad.
Yep.
And I haven't caught up with Chad in years. But I think he was going on tour with Rachel, right?
Yep.
They were going to hit the road.
Yeah. And not only that, but I'm interviewing them this time next week, actually. Chad and Rachel are in Nashville, Tennessee right now, playing as Cloverdale, Nashville's country artists. And on Monday next week, we're going to be having a conversation, which is going to be fun. But so Chad had been teaching you. And I remember him telling me, you got to meet this kid. Not only is he a wicked drummer, but he's a really cool little I want to call you badass, but you were so sweet. So we were mostly doing like some rudimental stuff. I remember you had all these chops together, but as we started looking at what you already had in terms of fundamentals and skill, I was telling you, if that's really what you want to do and you want to play music for a career, we got to talk about the other stuff that goes along with business development and attitude adjustment and all that kind of stuff. So I remember spending a lot of time just learning about the hang, which is a constant conversation for me here on the show, that it's so important to have that side of things beyond just the chops, right? So at that time, you were focused on basketball. I know you're playing violin, right? And I think you play piano too. Is that right?
Yeah, I wasn't as serious about piano back then. I was studying violin quite a bit. That was a regular thing. But it was all about the drums, man. Yeah. As you know. And I want to just like praise you for a little bit too. Can I do that?
No.
Because like growing up, like biggest mentor, man. Like I so appreciated your transparency and just like you were saying, like exposing me to the other things about the industry that people don't necessarily talk about, right? Like there are good folks and there are not so good folks. And a lot of it comes down to competition and just like the culture around the music business and well, not just music, but entertainment in general. And I feel like that prepared me for so much.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like, because like chops are one thing, but just like surviving and being able to, work with people and know that it's not always going to be a good situation, right? It's like you got to kind of be able to take those hits as they come, right?
I'm curious to know if you ran into any of those things along the way and thought, oh yeah, Kevin mentioned this may happen. Do you have any speed bumps like that popped up that you can remember?
Maybe not specific things. It's more just sort of the general attitude, right? Of like people trying to get gigs, not just in music, not just like for sessions, but just across the board. Like everyone's trying to do the same thing. Everyone's trying to have a like a YouTube channel where they're doing covers, or they're trying to get gigs and it's tough and you're just competing for space. And but not even just that. It's like working in entertainment. It's just so competitive and cutthroat, right? And there's this established culture where it's like, unless you are killing yourself, you're basically just proving that you don't want to be there. And that's, yeah, it's rough.
It really does thin the fan apart for sure. You know, when, especially this time, you talked about cutthroat, competitive, and online stuff. You mentioned, you know, people are competing for like views. It's crazy to see. I think people using clickbait and go on those routes, you know, where they're just doing everything they can to undercut the other people, you know, to try and get ahead. There's content creators out there, you know, people that are legitimately coming up with really good information, whether it be Todd Zuckerman, you know, with his great drum content, or, you know, you look at scientists right now that are talking about the pandemic and what makes this virus so different, and really putting a positive spin on people's understanding and education. You know, so there's all sorts of great content out there, cluttered by people that are just filling the internet full of garbage, right? And right. I think one thing that I really loved about watching your evolution, you were the king of being able to adapt and shift. I think about the first time you went to Berkeley for that summer program. You wanted to play drum set, but you got there, and what happened?
Yeah, I forgot about that. And I don't know really how this happened, but I think it was because at that time I was studying some Latin music. And so, you know, flew out to Boston, had that initial day at the camp, and they said, well, what are you interested in? And I said, well, Latin music. And, but I was really, really digging on Horacio Hernandez at the time.
I remember. Yeah. You got me a CD.
And, I loved his book and was trying to, like, you know, get through as much of that as possible, and was thinking that, okay, I go to this summer camp and be playing drum set. But then I was on hand percussion the whole time, which, you know, at the time I was kind of bummed about, because I was like, I want to be on drum set. But I mean, in retrospect, I think it was good to, you know, learn, you know, these standard conga patterns and learn about clave, but from the perspective of, like, you know, this traditional like Latin drum setup or percussion setup. And it was awesome. It was great.
Okay. Well, people that are out there that may not know, if they're not musicians, but they're watching this, and they may not know that Berkeley School of Music is really the most reputable music school pretty much in the world, you know, along with like Juilliard and, you know, a couple of others, but primarily Berkeley School of Music is the place you go to get the premier expertise from the highest educators. So going there, learning basic conga patterns is maybe not the best use of time or money. But I would imagine you probably had some amazing instructors there that got beyond that. I would hope. You want to talk, you know, we didn't really talk about even how you got into that, but it's really tough to get in the summer program. So what was the process of even getting in there in the first place?
Oh man, I'm trying.
Do you remember? I know it's a long time ago.
I think it was a video submission.
Okay.
I think initially to get into that. And that was me on drum set. But I know that for the actual audition, the actual Berkeley audition, was video and then in person in Seattle.
Oh, really? Okay. So they had a sort of an outpost that you could go to in Seattle and talk to educators and okay, that's cool. You didn't have to fly to Boston.
No, didn't have to fly to Boston. It was the Experience Music Project. They like set up shop in there and actually occupied some of the rooms for the auditions. Yeah.
Right. That was okay. So you're 15 when you first got the summer program, and that was right around the time you started doing the drum offs too at Guitar Center. And I remember that was what we focused on for a little while. We had lessons where you set up compositions, and it was more than you just walking in and playing a drum solo, but you wanted to do something musical, and they had this criteria, right, for the drum off. I remember you had stage presence was part of it, so you were incorporating these crazy chops. And I remember at that point you were a big fan of John Blackwell, Prince's drummer, amazing drummer. He had really cool technique to do a pseudo spin. It looked like a spin, but it was essentially just kind of pivoting the stick inside with his fingers. But you were trying to incorporate that into really cool chops based stuff for your solo, and you just decided at the last minute to add it in. I remember that the very first drum up,
dropped my stick.
You dropped a stick. Yep.
Dropped a stick.
I remember, and the cool thing about that, as a drummer, you know that you can either cave and just like walk away with your tail between your legs, but you were a pro. You jumped right back into it, and didn't stop you from not only finishing the solo with complete sort of expertise, but you went back the next year. You threw it back into your solo again next year. Do you remember?
I remember doing it twice. I remember doing it twice, but yeah.
Well, I remember you just you went in because at the last, you did it last minute. I remember you even asking me, should I throw it in there? And I don't remember, hopefully I didn't give you bad advice, but I can't remember if I was judging that one or not, because I didn't like to be the judge for those, because I believe that, who's to say that one drummer is better than another? Who's to say that one, artist is better than another? It's all subjective. And, but in terms of the criteria, they had, the stage presence, I think there was originality was one of those things. Just technique was another one. So there were 4 criteria. And, I was so proud of you, because you were honestly, you were going to bat against, 25-year-old ringers from New York, guys that have been playing session drummers, session gigs. Dennis Dubb was one of those guys. I remember thinking, it's like you as a basketball player going out there and play against Kobe, at 15, which was really cool. And I was proud of you, and you rocked it, man. Even
I felt like a total novice, like coming into that. I mean, those guys were and not just like, this isn't just from my perspective as a kid, like they were killing. They were so good.
Great drummers. But, I just think a lot of people are sort of intimidated by any of that, and they don't even take a chance, And so that sort of paved the way in my mind, watching you do what you've done, over the course of your career and your life, not letting adversity get in the way, your whole family's kind of been like that. And your sister Katie too. I was amazed at watching what she was doing, going out and working with tribes and really looking at groups in need and being super helpful with them. I think your whole family has been like that, and it's inspiring. It's one of the reasons I was really excited to talk to you about this, because you went from the summer program, doing those drum off competitions and not letting any of those things sort of hold you back. Then you went on and you got into Berkeley right after high school. And early on, you were telling me, man, I'm really into basketball too. Should I continue to play basketball or should I give it up? And I remember telling you early on, the one thing I'd said, I don't know if you remember this, but I said, I think just stay away from relationships for a little while, don't get hooked up into a girlfriend when it's, and I didn't mean,
I remember that,
not have a dating thing, but and I both know that at 15, man, hormones are going crazy, and it might affect your focus on other things. But I look back at that, I think it's horrible for me to give that advice, because I didn't take that advice at all when I was 15. But looking back, and then now, when you went on to school and left family behind and moved to Boston at the ripe old age of 18, right? You were living there. I think, I've talked to a lot of people that have Berkeley education. And one of the things that you and I talked about, I would love to get your perspective on how difficult or easy was it to come into that environment, not knowing anybody and trying to break into the music scene there?
Well, I think the first thing I did is I immediately compared myself to everybody else there.
Okay.
And tried to kind of figure out where I was in terms of talent level, right? And so I was coming in with that insecurity, and which I think just about everybody else was, right? Because you hear that it's a good school and that everyone's killing, and you want to have a positive experience. So coming in there was that. But I think pretty quickly, and again, because like I was a kid,
Yeah.
so coming right out of high school, which isn't like the best environment in the world, just in terms of like socializing and all that stuff. So when I got to Berkeley, it was like, oh wow, like all these people share like the same interests that I do. And that kind of happened after the initial like, oh, like, am I ready for this? Right. Because you come in doing a ratings audition, right? So, and it's a rating from like 1 to 8, and there's I think 4 or 5 categories. I don't know if they still do this or not, but there's a rating of 1 to 8, and I think I came in with 6s.
Okay.
And there were some killing musicians coming in with like 8s across the board, and I was like, oh, I got a long way to go. But so that's kind of where I started. And then, but as I started like meeting people just in like the cafeteria, stuff like that, in my ensembles, you kind of start to find like who's interested in the same stuff that you are. I'd imagine now, like students going in there, it's probably so much easier to find people who are interested in what you're into because of like Facebook groups and stuff like that. But it was a little bit more like, well, for example, like my best friend Corey, we ran into each other on the street, and I was walking with my roommates, and he just kind of said, "Hey, where are you guys going?" And we're like, "We're just heading to the cafeteria," and then he joined us, and been best friends with him ever since. And he lives in LA right now.
Okay.
In fact, I went on tour with him a few years back with Leroy Sanchez. He played guitar, and I was on this like really stripped down, like percussion / drum set thing. So.
Okay.
Yeah, but so the relationships last.
That's,
for sure.
The fact that he even reached out to you, just made that initial connection is something that's so tough for a lot of people. They're intimidated, especially now. I mean, people are so isolated online, they're not really reaching out in personal, sort of the personal skills are a little lost, but, it's great that you and Corey have maintained that relationship. I would think that a lot of people that you did some of these workshops and programs at Berkeley, have you stayed in touch with any people that you did performance with as well?
Yeah. So I have a buddy, Kevin Liu, who was actually living in Vegas. I think for the podcast banner photo you used, K Liu's in the middle, I think.
Oh, really?
And that was actually, that was a photo from the Palms recording studio. So, and that's when he was working out there, and we were doing some session work at the Palms. And I think I need to catch up with him, but I'm pretty sure he moved to LA not too long ago. But there was kind of this split where I had a bunch of buddies, my buddy Christian Pran, they stayed on the East Coast, and they're in New York City now.
Okay.
And about, half of the group went to LA, or more than half. So yeah,
that's a natural progression, right? For a lot of people when you get out of Berkeley. Was your idea at that point, because you changed majors when you were there too, right? You were, rather than performance, you went into.
Yeah, it's funny, in retrospect, because, and as you know, and I think you introduced me to Dave DeCenzo's stuff.
Right.
Right. And so,
and he's an instructor there.
He's an instructor there. And I'm, I feel like ultimately you were the one too, who was like, you should really consider Berkeley. And I don't think it was really even on my radar until we were, getting to our lessons and actually talking about like music as a career.
Yeah.
Right. So I definitely owe you that as well. But the reason why I bring up Dave DeCenzo is because I remember us, just like going through some of his videos and just being like, yo, this guy is incredible. And so I like started like transcribe his stuff. But the reason why I bring that up is because I never ended up studying with him.
Really?
And it's because when I got there, again, I had every intention of becoming like a rock star drummer. That's like what I wanted to do. I wanted to like go on tour with Usher. That was like the dream.
That's right.
That was the dream. But then again, within that first week, when you're going through that orientation, it becomes really clear quite quickly that there are so many different things that you can study there. Right. And I think I just assumed I was going to do performance, but that's not what I ended up doing. So when I came in, I learned about like music synthesis. at the time it was called music synthesis there. I think now it's called electronic music production or something
Okay.
like that. And then there were some other majors like MPE, music production and engineering, and like film scoring, and there were all these other things. So um, I don't know if this is a good thing or not, but I just immediately saw all these different opportunities and was like, I kind of want to just in my first semester dabble and see what I gravitate towards. Was still taking private lessons there and everything. But unless you major in performance, that limits who you can study with.
Right. Okay.
And everyone wanted to study with Dave. So I was,
Yeah.
it's funny because that was a big reason why I wanted to go. And I never ended up studying with him because of all the other things that were offered. And I just ended up going in a slightly different direction.
Do you have any regret about that decision?
Not really. I mean, my only regret is not pushing harder to study with Dave. And I
Okay.
remember going to one of his clinics and talking to him after. Super nice guy.
Yeah.
Really, really chill. And he was saying, look, like if you want to connect just outside of Berkeley, we could just do private lessons like on the side. Like he was really cool about it, super approachable. And then we just ultimately didn't make it happen. But that's my biggest regret, I think, in terms of drumming is not connecting with Dave more, because he was an open resource, super approachable. And so, yeah.
Man, there's a really fun one. I think I've seen this. I'm going to share just a tiny bit of this solo. Is that cool if I do this really quick? There's this solo of DeCenzo at this club, a tiny club. And this is an old video, but if people out there haven't seen Dave DeCenzo, they should. Let's see if I can share this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Let me turn that audio on here.
It's just unreal.
Oh, you know what? It's yeah, I actually have a different interface. I forgot it's not going to let me play this audio. That's too bad. Well, you know what? Check out Dave DeCenzo. He's a wicked dude, and that solo is fun. There's
so good,
tons of stuff out there, but it was good that he allowed you the opportunity to study outside if you wanted to. But I think in terms of like the curriculum you studied, the way you shifted and looked at the other opportunities, the gig that you got right after school was one that I would love to have you share too, the Sony gig. How did that thing come about?
Yeah, that was and just an application I applied to. It was
Really?
It was for their internship program.
Were you living in Boston at the time, or were you out in LA?
I was living in Boston, and that's what actually brought me out to LA.
Okay.
Is I think I applied to it 4 or 5 months before my last semester at Berkeley, and didn't hear from them 4 months. I think it was like a week or two before my graduation where I heard back from somebody there. It was completely taken off guard too. Like I did not expect that call. I think it was just how their like HR system worked. That they just got way out ahead of everything and had posted the job months in advance before they actually started doing like the initial interview process. So I get that call and go through a series of interviews, and then a month later I was flying out to LA and working at Santa Monica studio.
Oh, in Santa Monica. Oh, yeah. Now, did they specifically tell you that you're going to be working on God of War, or what did they tell you when you got the call for the new opportunity?
So that was a super lucky situation, because I remember during the interview process, there were, I think, potentially 3 locations where I could have ended up: San Diego, Santa Monica, and Foster City, like up in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And in the initial interview, they asked me what my favorite games were. And like, I hadn't done too much like research on this at all at the time. I was a really big fan of God of War, because God of War 3 had come out when I was a senior in high school.
Okay.
And I love that game. I thought it was so fun. But I didn't realize at the time that God of War was a Santa Monica studio game.
Really?
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. I was just a kid. I was playing video games and was like, this is awesome. I love this. And so on that interview, they asked me what my favorite game was. And I said, God of War. And they said, oh, that's great, because they're actually working on God of War Ascension right now in Santa Monica. Would you want to go and work on God of War in Santa Monica? I said, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's how it happened,
right out of school.
Right out of school, yeah.
So it sounds like an amazing opportunity. There was a challenge though, the gig itself, right? You want to talk about how grueling that was?
Yeah, the internship was great. Like the internship was awesome. I had an incredible boss. Shout out to Peter Scaturo. He's still there.
Okay.
And early on, it was a lot of music editing. And it was great too, because I was thrown right into it. I think this was 2012, and jumped right into music editing work. That was primarily what I was doing as an intern.
Okay.
But I mean, Pete was so cool. He got me involved with, like, I was able to actually sit in on meetings with like Tyler Bates, the composer for the game, and be a fly on the wall for recording sessions at Igloo Studio.
Really?
Yeah, it was really cool. We were doing remote sessions, recording choirs from Europe, and actually monitoring that session from LA, which was awesome.
Wow.
It's a really cool experience. So as an intern, that was about a 6-month gig.
Okay.
It was originally 3 months, and then I got invited back to do it another 3 months. And then after that, that's when
is that paid at all?
That was a paid gig.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
And so after that, after the 6 months of the internship, then I got a contract to work exclusively on God of War. And that's when it basically felt like camp, because we were there all the time.
Yeah.
Like 3 months of basically living at the studio. Yeah.
Like 18-hour days, just nothing but eyes on timelines. And, it's an interesting thing for me because I haven't seen that sort of game production or music production for those products, but I know that the bottom line for those things is that the game is going to make millions and, whatever, $1 billion for the company. Right. So, timelines are critical. They've got all these developers doing the visual parts of the game, and then you're stuck in this cubicle. Or what was the environment like? Were you in a sort of a cube farm with a bunch of other engineers doing editing?
So the audio department kind of had its own little like wing of the building.
Okay.
And this was at the old location. They currently, I think they're in Playa Vista now. So they moved locations. But in the space that we were in Penn Station, there were, I think, a series of maybe 10 or 15 sound booths. Yeah, so I got to hang out in one of the side booths or sound booths, and yeah, get to work there. So,
did you feel at that point that you were spending so much time sort of in front of a keyboard there working and not so much on music production of your own? Did you feel stifled a little bit?
Yeah, it was tough because at the time I was in a relationship.
Right.
And my girlfriend at the time, she was living in New York City. Oh. And so that was tricky. Yeah. Right. And, being able to actually connect with her was really hard at that time.
Sure.
And so I was trying to kind of balance that. Right. And not sure if I was going to stick around LA or not after the internship. And so I think that was a big question mark at the time, was like, well, okay, I'm in this relationship, but she doesn't want to be in LA. She wants to be in New York City, and I want to be in LA. And that was pretty rough at the time. But ultimately I decided to stay and accept like that second,
the contract.
Yeah.
Okay. You accept the contract. The relationship takes a turn. But as far as your own musical production, I mean, your own like playing, were you able to do any of that, or was there any time for it? Or
not when I was on contract.
Okay. Yeah. It's just,
I mean, that was like getting there at 10 in the morning and then not leaving until, sometimes like 2 or 3. I think the latest I stayed was 3. And what was nice is I could walk back to my apartment.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And Corey, who I had mentioned earlier, we were sharing a place. We had a 2-bedroom in Santa Monica that was rent controlled.
Oh, so nice.
We got so lucky with the apartment there. I think this might be too much information, but we were each paying like, I think $800 a piece.
Oh yeah, man. Can you imagine that now?
As soon as we left, I think the rent went up to like at least 3 or 4.
God.
So we just kind of snuck in there, and
that's amazing, man.
On the spot.
As a kid right out of college, Santa Monica, you would think coming from Oregon too, right? Where you've got beaches and just beautiful weather and gorgeous people everywhere, but you're stuck inside doing music production and engineering. That's tough. So after the contract, what was your next move?
So it was interesting. So around that time, or towards the end of my contract, I don't know how this happened. In fact, actually, no, I think this happened when I was an intern. My buddy Tom, who now lives in the UK, at the time he was in LA, and he had a recording session in Santa Barbara, or just outside of Santa Barbara. And so he asked me if I was free one of those weekends. And during that time when I was an intern, I had my weekends open. So I said, sure, let's do it. And so he connected me with a composer out in the Santa Barbara area. This is the guy who was doing the recording session for Tom. And so just kind of through osmosis, met him and vibed with him. And during my contract, if I remember correctly, I got a call from him saying, would you consider coming up here to work at the studio?
Full time? Or a job?
Yeah, it was a job. I don't know if we had actually discussed those details at that time. But it was basically like, when you can come up here, maybe we can at least talk about it. All right, have like an initial interview. And so after my contract ended, I went up to Santa Barbara, had that interview, and moved up to Santa Barbara within a few months of that contract at PlayStation. So, yeah.
When things ended up at PlayStation, I'm just curious, did you, obviously game came out, you probably felt a little sense of pride, right? That you had a good part in producing.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was super stoked too, because even though I was an intern initially, right, and switched over to contract, they were nice enough and cool enough to give me credit on the game.
Really? That's
right.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was pretty stoked about that, getting like a music editor credit on a AAA game.
Absolutely. Yeah. It would have been nice to get points, I'll bet too, huh?
Yeah. I honestly don't know how that works, but yeah, I was just happy to be there, man.
Sure.
Honestly.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned too, just these like Tom giving you a shout and asking if you're interested in coming up to Santa Barbara, all of these networking opportunities, right? Where one relationship sort of leads to another one if you leave yourself open to it. And, I am a firm believer, in trying to nurture those relationships as best you can. I feel bad that so many of my friends, like you and I, it's been so long since we've gotten to catch up, right? Like it's busy and crazy. But, if it's authentic and sincere, those relationships are fulfilling and nurturing in a whole sorts of ways that don't necessarily have to lead to opportunities. But you found though that, networking from one person to the next has really been a great opportunity to get some of these cool gigs you've had working in that studio. Did you do much in the way of studio performance and recording when you were at Berkeley? Did you learn a lot about engineering and miking and all those kind of things?
Coming out of school, I thought I had, a decent set of chops when it came to recording, but that really felt like an elevated, like, it's like, okay, this feels like grad school in a way. This is like next level learning on the job, actually putting things into practice with like real session musicians. And I mean, the crazy thing about that gig too was that, we were small. It was just the two of us.
Yeah.
And we would recruit people to come up. So I should provide a little bit of context. So this was for composer Chris Ting, who has worked on Futurama, Suits, the USA Network show. And so on top of being a composer, he also loves to record artists, bands. And he had this idea for this altruistic project called the Grow Music Project. And this is while he's composing for television too. And so that's where he needed help the most. So when I came up, it was kind of a combination of assisting him with Suits and sort of being his liaison between the studio and the post-production team on that. But the biggest thing was, okay, how do we do this Grow Music Project in an altruistic way where we can bring in artists, not charge them to use the studio. And again, this is his rig. This is, his studio is crazy. If anyone gets a chance to actually YouTube or Google Chris Ting recording studio, it's nuts. I mean, where his control surface is, the whole thing is on like a big lazy Susan.
Okay.
It's wild. And so he has his composing setup and he has his like music production setup. And so the reason why he has this on a lazy Susan is because his studio monitors are fixed in the studio, so they don't move. But if he's working on, his composition for Suits, but then he wants to switch over into like music production mode, recording bands, right? I mean, that's a 90-degree switch. Or
spins the console and
so
wow.
Instead of like being like this and the speakers are over here, you literally hold on to this rope and pull the whole thing around so that now that part of the that area where he's sitting is now in perfect position to the speakers. So
that's cool.
It was wild. It was wild. Yeah.
Did you do some recording yourself there too with some of your stuff?
Not really. I mean, again, the focus was really on Grow Music Project.
Okay.
So, and what we did for that was there's initially a round of submissions from artists, and we went through those submissions and found the top 5, and we brought them in for the initial 5 sessions.
Okay.
And they all came in separately, and they would spend the weekend with us, and we would track their song. But during that time, we would also film the whole experience.
Okay.
And like documentary. That was part of the gig. So we had to not only get the artists out there, but we also had to recruit, videographers to come out. I bought a DSLR. So
I remember that. Yeah.
I was hopping between engineering sometimes to back in the editing bay, transferring footage from my DSLR to playing drums on sessions. It was wild.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
That sounds really fulfilling though. Sounds cool to have a bunch of hats to wear. It
was a lot of fun. I do think, just to be completely honest, at the time, I was so far away from LA, or at least it felt like that, right?
Yeah.
It's not super far, but I pictured after PlayStation, I pictured myself staying in LA.
Okay.
And continuing to either stay in the gaming space in LA or start doing more gigging on drums. I didn't picture myself moving, 2.5 hours north to a tiny little beach town.
Right.
And then commuting another 30 minutes up to like the San Ynez area.
That's where the studio was.
It's up in that area.
Okay.
Yeah. And so
which I love that area. It's beautiful, man. We just talked about that.
It's gorgeous.
That's a lot of driving.
It was a lot of driving, and part of me was like, I miss my friends.
Yeah.
I felt like, very alone, and but like the major silver lining of all this is that I met my now fiance, Ellie, here in Santa Barbara, which I am, I'm so lucky to have met her. And but before that, it was grueling. And it was kind of like, man, is this really what I want to do? Am I actually losing my contacts from LA by being here?
Yeah.
And so it was tough.
Those contacts are important. I mean, in the business, it's so crucial. I know you've done some touring, you've done some recording, you've released quite a bit of your own stuff, which I'm always impressed too, that you could find time to be creative and put that together. But are you doing any of your own music right now while you're up there in Santa Barbara?
I'm trying to. Right now, I'm actually doing sound design work. I'm on contract right now.
Okay.
With a company called Pro Unlimited. So they work with, I don't know who all they work with, but they work with different tech companies, and like they work specifically with Facebook, and I'm sure a few others, but I'm contracted through them, doing a 6-month contract. So that's where a lot of my energy is doing sound design work. But as much as I can, I'm trying to compose and not only work on like, I'm really into retro pop right now, as I think everybody is.
Right.
So like I play guitar and keys, and I'm producing my own stuff, but I'm also trying to do orchestral stuff too. So I'm trying to do it all as much as possible without spreading myself too thin. And it's hard. It's hard being able to do everything.
But, yeah. You
The
know,
days aren't long enough.
I was going to say, at least, if you can look at the silver linings of being at home with the pandemic,
Right.
you're not on the road with a band trying to make that all work too. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I do love to look at the silver linings of any of these things. Tell me about some of those things that have sort of shown up in a way that have been helpful to you besides just having more time to spend on those projects.
Yeah. Well, I think, when I was working up in the Valley, which was it was an incredible experience. It kicked my ass in a good way, but it also helped me figure out what it was that I ultimately wanted to do. Right. So after going through that experience, I knew I wanted to go back to like the video game / interaction space.
Okay.
So by doing that, I kind of figured out, okay, this is really what I want to get back to eventually. And so I did decide to go back to school and get my master's in interactive media and games, which is very different from doing undergrad at Berkeley.
Yeah, I bet.
But the cool thing about it was I could take my like music and audio background and I could apply it to game design. And so, yeah, I did 3 years of that, just finished not too long ago,
Right.
and got my butt kicked there, which was great.
Yeah.
So now, yeah, I'm doing more like interaction, sound design work, which is really cool.
Man, do you feel like the future holds a little time for you back in Santa Monica, either going back to PlayStation, or can you kind of write your own ticket? Now you've got the masters behind you and some more experience, and do you feel like you've got more opportunities to maybe change platforms or companies?
It's still hard.
Yeah.
It's still hard. It's super competitive. There are a lot of good people that work in tech, and there's a lot of amazing people that work in games. And I would say compared to, the film industry and the music industry, it's less cutthroat, at least from my experience so far. At least the environment is a little warmer, I should say. But it's still hard, and there are still people trying to get to the top. And I think the bottom line is, at least for me, is just to stay as humble as possible and be appreciative of the opportunities. Right now, I feel incredibly lucky to have a contract doing what I'm doing, in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
I feel incredibly lucky, so lucky. So I just try to remind myself of that.
Okay. I don't want to cut you off there, but I talk about luck and fortune, the difference between those two often, just the last conversation I had with New Shoes the other day. I started questioning luck versus fortune when you look at opportunities that you might get. You've got this contract during the pandemic that you're able to work from your environment right there. You've got the studio at home, right? And so you say lucky, but you paved the way to get there, right? You did the hard work. You got the degree. You got the experience. You networked those things. It's very fortunate, I think. And I'm not trying to correct you. I'm just thinking that observation. It's more of a study for me to look at the difference between those things, because luck is just so much by chance. And I don't know how much of that, your particular environment is by chance. You really should pat yourself on the back a little bit about doing so much work to get where you're at, and you overcome a lot. I think the competition, sure, there are people that are out there that have the skills and the technical ability to, push faders and understand sound design and the sort of internal workings of those things. But your humility, for sure, is something that not a lot of people have. And your ability to communicate and listen is a really important thing that I've noticed that you've had from the beginning. So I think, in terms of competition, if you can get in front of those people, it seems like you've got a head up over some other people, just in terms of the person that you are. I would not question that, you'd be able to sort of bypass some of those people that are competitive. But in my mind, I still want Usher to call you and take you out on tour playing drums, Is there
I would love that. That'd be amazing.
But
I appreciate the kind words too, Kev. I do.
Well, it's deserved, man. You've earned it. I love that watching you grow. It hasn't hardened you or made you less of a humble person, or somebody with gratitude. You've maintained that throughout. So I'm very, very proud to be able to call you friend. And I'm encouraged, that there are people in the industry that are doing it the way you're doing. Speaking of the industry and recording, I do want to say Stephen Young is the new U.S. Sales and Marketing Director for Audix Microphones, based here in Wilsonville, Oregon.
Audix is based in Wilsonville?
It is, yeah. I'm going to be going.
I did not know that.
I'll be
Has
going.
it always been there?
It has, yeah. So I'll be going tomorrow. This beautiful Audix microphone is one of those things provided by them and Five Star Guitars. And I'm going to go and they have a brand new line of studio professional headphones I'm going to be wearing starting tomorrow. So I want to give a shout out to Audix Microphones and Stephen Young for being supportive of the show and making great product. I'm guessing in the studio, you've probably used a lot of Audix, huh?
The first mic kit I had, drum mic kit, was a set of Audix mics.
Oh yeah,
they were amazing. They're amazing.
They really are great mics. And I'm encouraged when we're touring, that you'll show up at a place and the backline company has Audix throughout. And you're like, oh, thank goodness. It's at least it's consistent, and reliable. And from my position, I'm not hearing what the mics sound like, but out front, that the room's going to sound good. You talked about Santa Ynez area. When we did Lost 80s live tour last year, we came through and played the casino. And I just was so amazed by, I'm not a huge fan of the casino gigs, right? They all look the same inside, but leading up there, we drove straight from, we had a gig in Seattle, played in Southern Oregon, drove right through the night to get there. So I didn't get a lot of time until between sound check and the gig. But Solvang there, the little Dutch town that's in that hood, it's such a neat little town. It seems like right out of a movie set,
Right.
But
right.
You and I talked just before going live that's one of the places that didn't really seem to get affected too much by COVID in terms of people's attitudes and their thought about COVID. You said nobody's wearing masks; they're still out there, just shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, right? Yeah. It's. I know it's different everywhere. And like we were saying too, it seemed like there's a period of time there where I'm sure people are still feeling this way. Everyone was getting a little stir crazy and they need to get out. And so the beaches in LA were closed. The beaches just north of us were closed. But there were these little pockets, right? So Solvang, like you mentioned, packed. And I remember driving through and just seeing people with no masks. That's crazy. This was a couple months ago, right?
Yeah.
And then Santa Barbara as well. There's a period of time where our beaches were open. Well, everyone else's beaches were closed. And so everyone came here.
Yeah.
Were
you steering clear, trying to keep away from everybody there?
Yeah. Still staying away from the beaches.
Yeah.
And I think they may have closed them since then. I'm not sure.
Sure.
But it's been a lot of, hanging out at home.
And you're far enough south, at least you're not near the fires right now, right? Like
not near the fires now, although I can't remember if this was last year or the year before, the Thomas fire. I think it was a couple years ago now. We did have to evacuate.
Did you? Wow.
It was bad. I remember us just walking out to like the parking lot and looking out to the hills and seeing the hills on fire and being like, all right, we got to go.
Oh, brutal, man. It seems like, it's almost, I hate to say, I don't want to joke about it because people's lives are, being really affected, but it's like, what other things do you want to throw at California right now? It's spooky. You in terms of like travel, are you getting to do any, I know when you did that short tour with your buddy and you had the stripped down drum kit where you had kind of a percussion and tour kit, are you part of that ensemble? Are you able to do local gigs at all with that gig or with that band at all? Or
it was kind of a bummer. So when I got into grad school, there was like a couple of weeks before actually knowing I had gotten in or not, where Leroy was starting to put together a second tour. Oh. And so in being, in conversations with him and his manager and getting prepared for that, I think there was like this week period where things were starting to kind of get aligned with this next tour that was also going to include Europe too. And so I remember at the end of that week getting a call saying I got in. to grad school, which was starting up right around the time the tour was happening. So I was in this position where I was like, do I go on this tour or do I go to grad school? And that was really tough, especially since this was, I can't remember if Leroy had just put out an EP or not, but there was a lot of momentum at that time because of new music that he was working on, at least. And I was like, do I pass up on a Europe tour?
Right.
And ultimately I decided to pass up on it. Leroy was super supportive and said, go do your thing. That's an amazing opportunity. I support you, which was awesome. So
yeah, you maintain the relationship again,
yeah,
it's hard, in those kind of positions because somebody that it's their baby, they could feel slighted, but it sounds like you navigated it in such a way that you kept things, positive and light. Now that you're done with school, once the pandemic's done, maybe round 3 of the tour, comes back.
Oh, yeah. If he would have me, I would love to join that party again because that was a lot of fun.
Between that and Usher, right? I could see
that. Between that and Usher, totally.
I sure, he's produced a lot and found a lot of artists too, right? I know he was the guy that sort of got Bieber his way. And can you ever see yourself in that kind of position where you could produce artists and sort of find the next big thing?
Yeah, it's like so much of it comes down to where do you want to channel your time?
Sure.
Right. And I think that it's really easy to, and again, I'm guilty of this where like, I feel like I like to dabble in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Whether it's doing like producing. Oh my God. Yeah. Kevin,
I get it. Yeah. But whether you're producing or I interrupted you.
Yeah. Producing or working on your own orchestral compositions or pop stuff or recording drums for someone else's album or, I think the focus component is tough. It's like just to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do this for a while. Right. So absolutely. I would love to produce artists at some point and kind of get back into that sort of thing. It's just a matter of, making it happen, especially now. I mean, there's so many opportunities for that just remotely.
Yeah.
So
well, you talked about doing the remote sessions, even when you're doing PlayStation, and that's fascinating to me to try and sit in Santa Monica and help sort of orchestrate this choir in, Prague or wherever, and really get the sort of intimate fine details, of an artist in a faraway place. I mean, we're dealing with this all the time right now during the pandemic. We're doing the podcast, virtually. If you and I were sitting in the room, it might be a little bit different in terms of vibe, and but I think people are getting better at it. In terms of technology, do you feel comfortable enough in being able to dictate? Say you found an artist that blew up in Milan, Italy, and do you feel strong enough about your skills right now that you could actually get them in the studio there and drive the ship, get their thing produced, and help sort of produce a project there?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
definitely. And I think that like right now too, just in terms of like production and how far, software has come, right? You don't need to, I know this is sad because we're drummers and we love to play acoustic drums and be in the studio. And there isn't a better feeling than that other than live performance, I'd say. I've used a lot of drum VSTs.
Yeah.
Software that sounds, you can't tell the difference.
Right.
And I feel like that is taboo to say amongst musicians, but it's the truth.
A lot of that stuff too are sampled live drums anyway, right? So
right. Exactly.
I mean, some of those libraries, getting the Abe L'Oreal Jr., I think has sort of like, commandeered a lot of that market, right? Where most of those loops that people are using and samples are Abe Jr. stuff out there. But
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, the place where drummers are really sort of still held in high regard is, interacting with the band live. When you're touring and playing, you don't want to see some drum machine out there, right? So I hope, but it's
always better with a drummer. It's always
of course.
better.
Yeah. We can say that, but we know too. My singer for Flock of Seagulls, he bought himself a drum kit during the pandemic, and he's been playing every day. And I'm like, dude, I'm losing my gig. But I haven't played in 6 months. I played for a short video. Mike Skill from Romantics is here on the chat. I see. Yeah, hi, Mike. We did a little music video for him in the pandemic where we did masks, and it was a music video for a song that we recorded like 8 years ago. The only time I played at all since February. Got a gig coming up in Portland in like a week and a half, and I'm excited, but it's really weird. We're playing at a drive-in at Portland International Raceway, where people drive up and on the track, they can't get out of their car.
Oh, that's so cool. So they're
something.
actually making it happen.
Yeah. I mean,
that's awesome.
It's strange to think about, but I do worry about a lot of the musicians that are sort of stuck in a position of having to perform because A, they need the money, or B, they're just going to do whatever they can because, like you said, they're stir crazy. They want to play, but people at risk watching. That's the part that I get concerned about for people. We don't want to put anybody in sort of a health scare position, but they're stuck in their car. They can't go anywhere. So it'll be fun for us. I was just going to say, Robert Weatherby on the chat here is also, he's saying that you remind him very much of their son, coincidentally, but they said they were in agreement that when we talked about luck and fortune, for you, just it's foresight and hard work that kind of paved the way to get you where you're at. And, you talked about sort of what you could see yourself doing if you could just focus the time. If money was no object and pandemic was not currently sort of dictating what we're doing with our time, what would Ryan's perfect day consist of?
Oh man, my perfect day. Well, I'd be torn between sound design and my own music.
Okay.
Right.
Producing in sound design, can you talk a little bit about what that entails for people that don't know?
Yeah. So I guess in the world of film, sound design could be everything from Foley, which is actually just like recording footsteps or all the tactile stuff you see in movies, dialogue, like re-recording, just basically all things sound for film and games and that sort of thing, which is not directly related to music, but there is a lot of carryover.
Sure.
Right. Which I really enjoy. Right now, a majority of the sound design work that I do is actually very UI focused. So like interface design for apps and products, which is like very minimalistic design, like micro editing and that sort of thing. Some of these sounds are half a second long, but you got to make sure that like repetitive tolerance is addressed and it's serving the right utility. It's a completely different world, right?
And things that people don't even think about for the most part. It gets overlooked, right? Because it's such
it gets overlooked.
Yeah.
But there are tonal aspects to it. And, when you're working on products like this, you have to keep in mind too, that, if you're using like a major third, let's say in like a push notification or something like that, that there are people in other parts of the world where having a major third in the scale, it doesn't hit them the same way it hits us.
Really? So there's a whole psychological part of this design that really goes into producing this. Interesting.
So like by staying away from thirds and focusing more on fifths, like a push notification that just has the root in the fifth, that's more accessible worldwide than say using a flat third or a major third.
Interesting.
Like little things like that. Yeah. It's cool.
I love it. Yeah. All right. So that's the split, right? So half your day is sound design. The other half is working on Ryan Anderson music.
Right. I was going to say, like working on my own record. Right?
Okay.
So right now I'm working on a lot of retro pop. I've been putting some things out online, just getting a feel for how people are resonating with it. It's very guitar driven too. It's like very synthetic and guitar driven.
Okay.
So
how can people find that? If I'm sharing this afterwards, we archive this, how can people locate your music?
If you go to SoundCloud, I'll send you the SoundCloud link later.
I'll post it. Okay.
If you want to post it, that'd be awesome. And there's some stuff on just my personal Facebook. I need to be better about posting on my website, but right now I would say, Instagram's probably the best spot actually.
Really?
Yeah. I would say Instagram's the best spot.
You get your musical samples there. And then links to your bio to take people to the sources of that music. So it's Ryan Anderson with an SEN, by the way, folks.
Right.
I think I really want to, sort of just finalize this conversation by letting you know how proud I am of what you've done and the man that you are. I'm grateful that Ellie has a future husband in you. Your family means a lot to me, but more than anything, I am encouraged that you've developed into just a remarkable man in in an industry that's really notorious for chewing up people and spitting them out. I'm glad that you're behind the scenes in a lot of this stuff. I can't wait to follow what you're doing. Can't wait for the pandemic to wrap so I can get back down to Santa Barbara and let's go to Solvang and have a cup of coffee and Dutch whatever. And I'm really appreciative that you're spending the time with me here, man. And I needed you to know that.
Anytime. And again, Kev, you're the man. I love you, brother.
I love you too.
It's been way too long, and yeah, I owe you a ton just over the years. So
you know what?
Yeah.
Just keep paying it forward, man. I'm so great. It's so great to see you doing what you're doing. Robert Weatherby, thanks for chiming in on the chat. It's nice. You've got a lot of nice compliments and comments there for Ryan. If you haven't yet, folks, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/all access live with Kevin Rankin. If you're watching on Facebook or any other platform, please jump over to YouTube and subscribe to this channel. I've got amazing conversations with so many people, and Ryan is just one of them. This happens to be the 100th episode that we're airing today, right now. I thought that the New Shoes one was, but it was 99. So Ryan is officially 100. Please subscribe and pass it on. Tomorrow it will be great. We've got DJ Will Howell from KNAC in Los Angeles. He's a musicologist. He really is an encyclopedia of rock, especially. And this week, Tuesday, we've got the Vapors. I think I'm turning Japanese, the 80s iconic pop band. A bunch of great artists and visionaries coming up this week. Ruth McCartney, Paul McCartney's stepsister, will be on. We're going to talk a little bit about her family and a book that just came out with her sister Angie. And if you subscribe, you'll find out more. Go look at the past episodes. There's some really good stuff out there. So I will post a link to Ryan Anderson's Instagram, and you can find all the great music from him. Thanks again to 5-Star Guitars and to Audix Microphones for being supportive. I hope you all are healthy and happy and stay as safe as you possibly can, but get out there and live life. Be good to people. Ryan, please give my best to your family. Thank you for being here, my friend. And congratulations on all the progress, man. I'm so proud of you.
I love this. This was super fun. Thanks, Kev.
Thank you, buddy. Have a great weekend.
All right.
All right. Take care, folks. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.